It's complicated when you gravitate towards yourself. On the other hand, it's hard to talk to anyone else. You can't help where your mind goes. So let's harvest on the moon with the autumn snow. Cause I've never had so much to gain and threw it all away. And if I ever had the chance again, I'll probably do the same.
My name is Matthew Colclough. I'm a trained counsellor. I specialise in all anxiety disorders, more particularly panic disorder, OCD, social anxiety and agoraphobia. I'm trained in mindfulness cognitive behavioural therapy and cognitive behavioural therapy, although much of my own counselling comes from my own application to my own life and my own research. Much of my therapy is based on acceptance, and it comes from giving people knowledge. I have a main focus on neuroscience by giving people understanding of how the brain works, enabling them, empowering them to accept more easily. Okay, so I first got involved with anxiety because I experienced it myself many years ago. Teenage years, developed social anxiety at school, struggled very bad with that, which later progressed to panic disorder and then agoraphobia. Okay, so what is social anxiety? Social anxiety, very much like all the other anxiety disorders, has a common denominator, that being worry and heightened anxiety or panic. And in the situation of social anxiety is where this intense anxiety is surrounded, which comes about in social events. Most common ones are supermarkets where there's a lot of people, school, college, outings with friends, meals, restaurants, that type of thing. So the symptoms of anxiety are very much like the symptoms of any of the other anxiety disorders, and it's the same mechanisms that producing the symptoms, the fight or flight response, and it can manifest differently in different people. Some people it affects more the respiratory organs, so people will get breathlessness, heart rate will increase, they'll start to perspire more, people can shake and tremble, they can have like a lump in the throat called globus hystericus. There's lots and lots of different symptoms, dizziness, headaches, so many different symptoms. So my own social anxiety, which I can remember the transition period from high school to college, and it was during that transition period there in the new surroundings, new friends, because most of the friends from high school I'd known for a long time, especially coming up through primary school, but when I went to college they weren't there, and in these new surroundings they invoked many symptoms within myself, and for me it was always the respiratory symptoms. So I would have breathlessness, which would lead to panic attacks, and other symptoms was I used to sweat a lot as well, perspire, and an urgency to go to the toilet, but mentally it was always that avoidance. Mentally it was always consumed with thoughts surrounding how I could escape and get out of there, how I could put off college, and I remember at one point it got to the point where my parents had to ring up and speak to the teacher and let them know, or ask them was there any other way that I could still study but do it from the comfort of my own home. So yeah, I mean, in my own practice, I would say proportionally the majority of people that come to see me is of a social anxiety perspective, and from what I've found from speaking to these people, it's usually that transitional period, as I mentioned previously, when people are coming from high school to college. That's the age. If you look at the prevalence in anxiety disorders, it tends to be from like 14 to 24. that's the age there. So you know, it makes way for that transitional period there at 16 to 17, going to college, new surroundings, new people, new responsibilities, added stress, and that tends to be the trigger there. So the mainstream therapy for social anxiety these days, or certainly in this country, is CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy, and that's right across the board. I mean, that's for all anxiety disorders really. So CBT therapy, it's about acknowledging the thoughts, and when the thoughts come up, and we're talking specifically about the worrisome thoughts here, so they can usually be prefixed by the words, oh my goodness, what if, the what if thinking. So by catching the worrisome thoughts and then giving an alternate balanced thought, what you're doing is you're substituting that reinforcement with a healthy alternative. And that's generally CBT, but with social anxiety you need to implement exposure therapy. So this is by putting the person willingly, and that's a key word there, that person has to be ready and willing to go through it in the situation that warrants the stress response, and with the tools learned in CBT, it enables them to pass through it as easy as possible, with as least resistance, helping to change the neurology and helping to set up recovery in the long term. Okay, so that very much depends on a number of factors. First one being on the individual, how receptive they are to treatment, if they're willing to. Attitude is a big thing when it comes to recovery, and if the attitude isn't right on the person, then it could take a long time. I've personally found that if the person is willing to get help and believes that the answers lie in treatment and not medicinal, then work can be very good.